All right, everybody. Welcome back to Scratch the Vinyl. I'm Keynes Stevens. We have DJ BJ, Brooke Johnson in the house, and we also have the man, the myth himself, Mr. Chill, Randy Wilson. How are you guys doing?
Well, here we are for another episode of Scratch the Vinyl. I'd like to welcome all of our listeners.
You know, we like to start the show with doing quotes and maybe lyrics or different things. Do either of you guys have like a quote, a famous quote, something that we can kind of talk about to start?
Well, I've got something that kind of hit home to me this week, and it's, if my eyes could show my soul, everyone would cry when they saw me smile, by Kurt Cobain.
Wow. Man, the man, you knew I was going to wear the Nirvana shirt today, and you knew that we'd be channeling the man himself, Kurt Cobain. That's strong, man. I just watched Soaked in Bleach for like the fifth time. Have you guys seen that movie at all? You know what that is? It's basically a documentary about the death of Kurt Cobain, and we're getting close to the actual anniversary of his death, and there's still allegedly detectives out there saying that they could pin it on Courtney Love, and they're trying really hard. What do you guys think about that?
I did watch that. It was at the very end of it. I was like, oh, I don't know exactly what happened. Like, it really, a lot of questions, and it kind of put perspective on his life and Courtney, and completely changed my point of view on what happened.
Right.
Well, obviously during that time they were doing a lot of drugs, and there was a lot of conflict, and so it is really hard to determine maybe exactly what happened.
When I know Kurt Cobain, he suffered from horrible stomach issues, which is very timely for me because I'm suffered. But you know, the most interesting part of the documentary for me, if you haven't, for the listener out there, if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I think it's on like Tubi or, you know, any of those free deals out there. Go ahead and watch it and arrive on your own assumption. But the interesting thing to me is the detective, the private investigator that Courtney Love paid, that he had visited the house numerous times, and Kurt Cobain's body was sitting on the premises, and he didn't bother to check it out. So that was like the most interesting thing to me. Like, how could you miss a building that size on their property?
Well, kind of leads into my quote there. You know, obviously he had some, you know, deep issues, and he knew it, and they were a reflection on his soul, and he was trying to convey that through that music.
Yeah. Well, he was kind of a tortured soul in a lot of different ways. You know, I like to sit around and think to myself, what would Nirvana have been? Like, what would their albums have really morphed into as they got older? Like, could you imagine if that band was still going today, right? And, you know, erase all the negative and all that stuff, and like, look at the superpower that Dave Grohl has turned into as a musician, and with the Foo Fighters and everything he's done. But man, if they had put all that into Nirvana, oh my goodness, I can only imagine the classics that would have came out of that band.
Yeah, and also, I think I've talked to a lot of musicians, and most of them say going through dark and deep things, and you know, a lot of them that I know have depression, or you know, and they convey that through their music. But I think though sometimes, like with Kurt Cobain and the way that his mental illness, and or if that's, you know, if he had that, but a lot of that, I think if he would have kept going, like David Grohl, like you said, would have just been amazing. Like the things that they could have done, especially when you have children, you know, have kids, and it kind of changes who you are. And I don't think he had enough time to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely see that with Dave. I mean, wow, what a career. I mean, he's, to me, is, you know, the pinnacle of the rock world, really. For a guy who had no formal training, just learned how to bang on the drums, and was all about passion for music. And, you know, his music today is just a reflection of his life. He, you know, he puts his heart and soul into everything he does and gives back to the people love the Foo Fighters. I've seen them 5 times in concert. I still tell people, you want to go see a real rock show, go check out the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean that they're really are carrying the torch right now when it comes to rock. I mean, they're still doing it. Their albums are all great. Their newest album is fantastic. Like they just don't seem to fall off, do they?
Oh, I love David Grohl. He's like one of my favorite dudes. He does so many wonderful things for people, like that in itself. Like when that kid got to go on stage and he gave him his guitar or something. It was so cool. I was crying. And then I loved his movie too that they put out. That was really off the wall, but I loved it.
Well, my favorite is the little drum challenge he had with Nandy Bushnell from the UK. And look how she has really grown into her own. I mean, she is a true musician. And, you know, Dave took that situation so tongue in cheek. And then, you know, to have her come out and, you know, play on Everlong at one of their last shows before Taylor Hawkins passed away. I mean, that is a, you know, epic time in history right there, in rock history right there.
I wonder how hard that was for Dave to have such a great drummer in the band, like, you know, Taylor was. You know, I wonder if they clashed about like the drums, or if David Grohl just kind of why do I keep calling him David, man? It's like he's like it's like I know him personally. Yeah, David. But anyways, Dave Grohl. Yeah, I wonder how much they clashed when it came to that stuff. But and like the drummer that they have now, I mean, I'm sure you could find a drummer that will mimic what Taylor did. But what do you guys think of him now? Have you seen him since he passed away?
Well, first of all, I do know a little history on that. I have seen plenty of documentary with them, and there is no conflict. There was no conflict. They were like brothers from day one. And Dave actually wanted to get out from behind the drums. He can play the drums, but and he's, you know, and he was best known for being, you know, the sixth drummer in Nirvana, but really he learned to play every instrument, and he became the front man. And he basically, you know, Taylor Hawkins was his then right-hand guy. I mean, he considered them as equals in that band as anything. There was, even though Dave was in the front, he knew what it meant to be the drummer, and he valued Taylor's talents like to no end. I don't know if you saw the tribute when Taylor's son played drums. I mean, man, he could beat the snot out of him and was going to be just like his dad.
And that's awesome that, you know, his kid picked it up and everything. I always wonder, like, when there's so many kids out there who grew up in these rock stars' lives, I always wonder why they don't end up being like the best musicians that ever lived. You know what I mean? Like, I know that you have to mix, like, I could think of so many, like, I mean, even Kurt Cobain, for example, his daughter is a musician and a very good musician, and she has some great stuff out there. But wouldn't it be something if some of these kids just like surpass all of them, like say Paul McCartney's kid or something comes through and just annihilates the Beatles in the next 50 years? Wouldn't that be crazy?
Well, you're close about one thing when you bring up the Beatles. So, believe it or not, Julian Lennon is the first nepotism baby to really attack the industry with no help. And I mean, it's very well documented. But Julian went on to, you know, to do his own thing and has had some success. Obviously not to the level that his dad or the Beatles had, but at least he did it on his own. And if you are a Beatles fan or a John Lennon fan, it's not hard to listen to Julian and love that voice.
Well, then he has another kid too, right? Sean Ono Lennon is also a fantastic musician and is put together. And when you listen to him, I mean, he has like the inflections and kind of the sound, and even those albums that he put out. When were those? Like in the 90s or whatever?
Yeah.
Sounded like his dad on a lot of that stuff, and it had kind of the British sound. Man, it was that, to be honest, if I had to choose between the two, and I do like I do like Julie. I like Sean Ono Lennon a little bit better myself, just because it connects to me more.
Well, I don't know if you know, but ironically, they have collaborated a lot in these last few recent years. So they've been trying to work on some stuff together.
I was gonna say there's a lot of kids, so that's a lot of pressure sometimes. But I think though that when you have a role model like that growing up, that's what you want to do. But I just sometimes, like you see firefighters and their kid's a firefighter, and then all of these, different facets for children. But I think that sometimes there's a lot of pressure on them too. And so maybe their whole soul is not quite into it because they're trying too hard. Sometimes, I don't know, like I think like Miley Cyrus is great now, but it was like, Billy Ray's daughter. And then she eventually, kind of came into herself and like figured out who she was instead of being her dad or being, like some of these kids, but they have a little bit of their parents in them. And I think that's what's so cool to keep that going and that, generational, especially Beatles and all of these, very well-known bands.
There was a rumor, I shouldn't say rumor, there was a little more to it than a rumor, that the actual siblings of all the Beatles had come together, George Harrison's son and Paul McCartney's son, and Sean and Julian Lennon, they had all come together to they were trying to do a collaborative thing. And I don't know if it didn't quite maybe work out, and that was kind of the thing, but there was an attempt to do it.
That's the album title right there. If they all came together, is literally come together. Man,
I love that.
I'll blow people out of the water, man. Every musician should just bow down and quit, burn your instruments.
Well, kind of back to one of your points earlier is you talked about where maybe Nirvana would have been if had Kurt went on. I do always think, man, what would John Lennon be putting out now? The state of things in society today. I mean, he was in so many ways kind of a voice through music. No war and peace, man, and the stay in bed protest against the war. I feel like he would have a lot to say and a huge influence on music today if he was still around.
Well, have you seen the movie Yesterday? Have you seen that yet? I mean, that's been out for a while. It's a great movie. But it depicts that type of scenario, but it was different because he wasn't. So it ends up showing John Lennon alive, and just kind of living his best life. And it almost made you cry. I mean, it did me, but I guess I cry at every movie. I didn't realize that till just recently. But that's the joy of being a mentally unstable adult,
Yeah, I actually love that movie, and there was a little something to where maybe that it brought a little peace to know that maybe if John Lennon hadn't been exposed to all that he would be still living a good, simple life, but that music would still have an impact on the world. It seems like yesterday, but it's been 16 years ago now. But I tell you what, every time I hear Into the Mystic by Van Morrison, it brings me back to a time where he introduced me to that album, and it's like he's right there in the garage, where we have our headphones on,
and that takes you to a good place, doesn't it? I mean, it at least you get to like relive that moment in your mind, and that's the beauty of music, isn't it? What about you, Brooke? Like, are there any songs in particular where
there's a lot of them?
Yeah,
but there's one in particular, and it's a hymnal, and it's "Oh, How Great Thou Art," I believe is what it. Yeah, my grandmother, she sang that all the time in church and just belted it out. And then we sang it, or the whole church sang it at her funeral. And
that, what an impact that has. All music, hymnal, gospel. I mean, you can find so much beauty in it, and that's what this show's all about. I mean, if you're listening out there, scratch the vinyl. It's just that we are all the music lovers. Music ties to our soul. And it's just kind of it's what gets us through. I don't even understand a person that the people who are like, I hate music or I hate movies. I'm like, so you hate joy or you hate fun or Like, what are you, a robot?
I agree with you. And just in entertainment, I think it kind of lets us get away from life sometimes and just kind of be in a solace, or even if it's to cry or to laugh or to be angry. It brings out so many emotions. And I think that that's good for people to do that. And like you said, like, you have to be a robot, like, or come on, like.
Well, definitely if you have just a little bit of spirituality in your life, you will understand that life is about vibration, and music is the ultimate in vibration, and we all can connect to it. And in so many ways, it is what brings us all together. And I do believe we could probably solve most of our world issues if we could all sit in a room and listen to some of the best albums of all time.
Well, yeah, I wish I could share, and I think that's why you and I, Randy, have chosen to be in entertainment where we share music with people, because we are people pleasers. We want so badly for people to feel that love, just like you in karaoke in particular, Mr. Chill. Everybody knows when they go to your show, we're going to have a good time. Like, you're going to pick the best songs. We're going to have a blast. We're going to sing and we're going to have fun. And that's the whole key to it. Even, you're probably like me, Randy, where even if you're having a bad day, right, you can still go there. And once you turn all that equipment on, you're ready to go. All that disappears. And it's all because of the music. It's not the drinking. It's not this and that. It's just the music.
Well, we're in so many ways, we're actually opposites, me and you, from a musical standpoint. You're very gifted and you can play music. You have great vocals. Like, you were made to be in a band. I mean, you were, and I wasn't, but I love it. And so I found a different path to connect music, and which is fine, because all I did was, find what I love and found a way to make it work for me. And you're right. There's so many nights where, depending on my mood, I will get people to sing certain songs from different eras. And it's funny to watch the reaction, that if you can pull out some of the best old songs, how even some of the younger generation goes, well, I'm not used to that, but wow, that's really good. Or they come up and ask, like, who was that? What? That was a really good song. When was that? And you tell them, well, it was 1972. They're like, no way, like 20 years before I was born. But it's amazing if you take some of the best old artists and play their music to a new generation, how much they like it, because it's just, certain music will just touch your soul.
And you're really good at picking that music for people, knowing like, hey, you're going to sing really, I bet this person will be awesome at this. And the last karaoke, didn't you do like little homage to one of your friends? And like, that was really touching. Like, that was really cool to do that, to see you and your friend go up there and sing to someone. And you also like bringing those old songs back. There's so many memories and so many events that have happened through this music. And like my kid, he's 22 years old and he loves like music from 50s all the way up until now. There's a couple of years he doesn't quite like them, but I love how children or kids are starting to be a little bit more open, and you help them do that. And sometimes you go to karaoke and you're like, oh, I'm going to sing the same song over and over again. And you're like, how about this? And then it brings up a whole new world for some of these kids. And I love that you do that.
The true artistry for musicians is if they can make their music and it can touch you in a way emotionally. Anybody can sing the songs. Anybody can read the words. But if you can touch on that vibration to your soul with your music, you can really, obviously, you can reach a lot of people.
You absolutely can. And the only time that I didn't get joy, though, when I was playing music, was for whatever reason, when I would do weddings, I absolutely hated weddings. Like the wedding receptions, I could not stand it. I would put anybody else in that seat if I had it booked, but they always wanted me to do it. And of course I would enjoy it while I was doing it, but you would think that as emotional of a guy as I am, that's an emotional thing, a wedding and wedding reception, people are having fun. But man, I could not stand weddings. I don't know how you do it. I mean, how do you do it?
I hired other people to do it as well.
And you're not the first person I've heard that have said that. Like, I've people that I know that play in bands, when they ask them to play at their wedding, they're like, well, it's going to be $17,000. If they're like, yes, then they're like, okay, I guess we'll do it.
Well, I think it's because there's so much pressure put on, this one special day that any little thing can go wrong. And because it in our weekly shows, heck, even in our podcast, we know that we could have technical difficulty. And the last thing you want is that bridezilla coming after you because one little thing went wrong that you had no control over at a wedding. And they're great, but when it comes to emotional connection to music, weddings can just be handled by playing traditional dance music and finish the night and move on.
Like I'll tell you, I'll share like the worst. I think it was the last wedding I did to it. So basically, you guys know where the First Avenue is here in Lincoln. Well, I had karaoke that night on the other side. And then I also had all my equipment set up on the one side, and they had the full wedding and everything. So I started off really horribly, right? Like I showed up late because they gave me the wrong time. And as I'm trying to load in, there's like people sitting everywhere staring at me. So I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. They're going to burn me at the stake. And then so they wanted karaoke later in the night. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. We have karaoke next door, but okay, we'll go with it. And so my KJ at the time, he was a really, I'm not going to say, he loved entertaining people. So he wasn't having as good of a time on the other side. So he was coming back and forth and singing karaoke at this wedding. And like every time this guy sang, it pissed the bride off more and more and more and more to the point where they wanted to kill me by the end of it. And honestly, I can't believe I got out of there alive. The thing that bothered me about it was always like, they would always say absolutely no heavy metal, at the reception, none at all. And then as they all start drinking, the brother-in-law, right, or the brother comes over and I want you to play Slayer. And it's like, no, dude, I can't do it. Like they told me not to. And so then what they do is they start bothering the bride and the groom, and they're like, he won't play what I want him to play. And they come over and start yelling at me. And pretty soon you end up playing.
After they've had just a couple cocktails.
There were two songs in particular. There was one by the band, I Shall Be Released, and also Blue and Green, which is a Miles Davis tune. He's got John Coltrane on there. He's got Bill Evans. And Randy, him and I were kind of saying something about, honestly, if Blue and Green, for example, doesn't elicit any, feelings whatsoever in you, when you start to listen to that, I mean, somebody should probably check your pulse. Right? Like to see if you're still breathing, like hold a mirror over your face, because that song, I mean, I listened to it again this morning. It's just, I don't even dig a lot of jazz. Not that I think it's terrible. It's just not my thing, but man, you can't help but like that song.
Yeah. You do not have to be a jazz and blues enthusiast to not hear that music to your soul. Like it touches you. There is so much emotion in every note. And I mean, Miles Davis and John Coltrane, I mean, they are the legends in that area. And every time I play that, again, it's not my typical genre, but man, it just touches me.
Miles, I have a friend that named his kid after Miles Davis. And now this kid is a really good musician. And I was like, I wish my name was Madonna or something, like he's doing great. But yeah, Miles Davis, he's a iconic guy.
What'd you guys listen to? I mean, what's in the old tape deck or the Walkman? What do you guys got when you're trolling around? The thing that really stuck out to you this week, something that's going to help people.
Man, so many. Working at a bar too. The one place where I work, it's always classic rock. So I got to constantly listen to classic rock. and I maybe hear the same song over and over again. But I love it all. It's all great. It's wonderful. And every once in a while, you'll have a customer come in and get the jukebox on, and they'll play like, Baby Got Back or something, and it kind of throws everybody off. But you see everyone over there dancing a little bit, that you didn't think, the little regulars would love it. But I don't know. I just listen to just a plethora of music. So I don't. What about you, Randy? What was your favorite one?
So this week I ran into a situation where I hadn't heard that song in a long time, and you don't have to be a big Todd Rundgren fan, but he's got a couple songs that can really touch you emotionally, and if you just go back and listen to the lyrics of that song, and it can touch you. Kane, in 1978, the Eagles won the 20th Grammys with Record of the Year for Hotel California.
Man, has it really been that long? Time has flown by. I would say that's probably all the accolades that they probably had and everything. But what album, honestly, can you think of where even people who don't know the Eagles, they definitely know that one album. So that album was obviously like the one of the most iconic of all time. So I could definitely see that. I just can't believe it was that long ago.
I was just recently, my mom's a big Eagles fan, and I think we've mentioned this before. The Eagles, kind of the farewell tour, even though Glenn Frey has passed away, had just came through our area. But my mom is a huge fan. She's seen them 6 times. I've only seen them 3 times. But for her birthday, back in, I want to say 2008, I took my mom for her birthday to opening night of the Eagles in Reno, Nevada. And maybe the best birthday present I ever gave my mom in her eyes. But ironically, like more than halfway through the show, fire alarms go off, and they had to evacuate us. And so we really didn't even get to see the end of the show. They had to cut the show short. But man, it was so still worth it. And Joe Walsh still had it. It was nice to see how they had come back together with a new album. And at the time they were trying to be a little political with some of the topics of their new songs, but still probably one of the best live performance bands of all time.
My parents had a ton of vinyls, and I remember as a little kid going through them, and they had a lot of Eagles. And I was born in 79. I think I remember the Long Run, because Mom's like, this is one for you. This is when you were born. So I do remember playing with those and listening to them, putting my big cans on, rocking on the rocking horse, listening to the Eagles. Yeah.
Well, the Long Run is my mom's favorite one.
Is it?
Yeah. In fact, I remember my mom had it in vinyl and on 8-track tape.
8-track. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did she later have it on cassette and then?
No, she never upgraded with technology. but it was a thing to go. Mom would let us put those albums on. Like those were her. So it was a big deal on Saturdays if we could put those albums on the turntable, and I'm sure that's where we found our love for the Eagles.
Well, Randy, you grew up in like prime record time. You know what I mean? Like when you were in like high school and college and stuff. I mean, you guys would go to the record store and you'd thumb through records. And man,
definitely my junior high to high school period is when going to the record store was a thing. Like you went and thumbed through albums after albums, and it was a big deal to be that if you knew your music, like it was a social thing. Like and going to concerts was a big thing. I used to say this all the time. I thought my mom was really strict when it came to a lot of things, but when looking back, she allowed me to go to so many live concerts that I feel in a lot of ways shaped my life when it comes to how I relate to music and my love for music. And when people say, "Oh, I love that band," I go, "Well, I saw them back in '84." They're like, "What?" Because a lot of the '80s band stuff, of course, have done these kind of retro nostalgia tours now, and of course, they're not the same, but they're still great to go to. And recently, of course, we were talking about ticket prices, and I've seen some of my most favorite bands for like $4, $7. Tickets were ridiculously cheap back then, and used to think that was expensive, and now today it might cost you $150 just for a decent seat to go see one of those bands today.
I wish I could remember all the bands that I did go see, though, because I'm horrible at that. There was a few times, like I was in Omaha, and we go to this little hole in the wall, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so and so," and I just didn't even comprehend. And I can't, to this day, I cannot remember who it was, but it was like Nirvana or something. It was some crazy band that just came in and just decided to play.
Well, we have that story here in Lincoln. Nirvana played at Duffys in 1990. I mean, this tiny little hole in the wall bar with a small stage that you could cram 100 people in. And can you imagine? I mean, I remember it. I was in college, and you got Nirvana and they're just jamming out, and it wasn't much longer. They blew up. I mean, they were never wanting to be mainstream, and all of a sudden here they are. And you're like, "Man, I just saw that band at Duffy's." In fact, I got a buddy that still has the live recording of that show.
Wow, that's something for the Smithsonian, man, for the Lincoln and Smithsonian, right? There have been some great venues here in Lincoln. Like when they used to come through, you're absolutely right. Like the club circuit and all that. Like Knickerbockers, back when Knickerbocker, man, I saw so many cool shows there. And you would literally, the bands would be hanging out because they had nowhere else to go. It's a small venue. And they would be just kind of standing over in a corner, drink, and you could go BS with them and hang out with them, and then they'd go get on stage and rip. I saw some of the best shows that way, like the Royal Grove back in its.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the Grove. Yeah.
And who hasn't seen a great show at the Grove? Those were some of my first shows. I see that they've kind of done some. They've done some changes to it too. Put a boatload of money back into it, and hopefully they're going to make it a destination once again. But yeah, the Royal Grove was always awesome.
That was a really good, fun place to go. And I remember calling into the radio station. I think I was like maybe 21, not 20. And I won Angry Salad. That was the band name, Angry Salad. His name was Bob. And we met him there at the Grove. And they didn't have a place to stay. And my roommate and I were like, "Well, hey, just come on over." And then we got to go to the Grove again. They were there, and they ended up doing a bunch of commercial music or something later on. But they had some really fun bands out there. And then my good friends of ours owned it for a little while. So we got to kind of tour the place and see different rooms that you didn't know really were there. And the green rooms, there was just like this feeling when you walked in there. And then all these people that signed their names and different bands that have been out there, like famous bands and really cool. Like it was just, that in itself was neat to see all of that. I don't know.
I think I love the Bourbon now for a lot of that same reason, the Bourbon Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I haven't been around long enough. I know a lot of the history, and now to go in there and see some of these great mid-level bands that maybe hit it big for a while and come back through, man, those are great shows. Like you realize why those bands are good, even if they didn't hit that mega superstardom. And the price, when, $20-$30 for a Friday night to go see a live band that good is so worth it. And the vibe there is really cool. I love it there.
Speaking of vibes and history, I mean, we would be remiss to not mention the Zoo Bar, right? I mean, and that of all the shows that I played as a musician, I played so many shows I can't even count. That was my favorite, was just playing there on like a Thursday night. We took it. We didn't really make much money that night. We got a couple free beers, and it was all good in the hood. But the thing was it was just, it felt so great to know that so many legendary people have played there, man. And it was just like to get on that dirty stage and play there. There was another musician playing there that night. I don't know if you know the guy. I'll try to have him on the show soon, but yeah, he's Chocolate Cake. And he's kind of a local legend. He's a busker downtown. He plays a lot. But man, he ripped a guitar solo in the bathroom, like, right? So like he had a really long chord and it's really close to the bathroom. And so he starts playing this solo, and I'll be damned if he didn't jump off the stage with guitar, kept playing, went in, took a leak, came back out, and it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I'll never forget that night.
Well, I was going to tell you, pretty much the Zubar, the history is written on the walls. Well, your story gives a new meaning to history written on the walls.
Yeah, I wonder what his aim was.
Of the walls.
How much of it hit this guitar? That's what I was.
Blood, sweat, tears, and pee.
John, if you listen to this, man, we definitely want you on the show. I used to do a little booking for him and stuff, but man, this guy is, I think, an alien from another planet, but he's one of the most entertaining people. And a lot of local musicians are. I mean, that's the joy of local music. So, I mean, for you guys listening, get out there and support local music. I can't say it enough. Not that you don't want to support the big bands coming through, but some of these guys are going to make it. There's a lot of talent in Lincoln. They're going to make it big. Well, that's all the time we have, everybody. We want to thank you guys so much for listening to the show, and please tune in next week for another episode of Scratch the Vinyl.